I don't know about you, but these days I get bombarded with adverts from TEMU, so I finally decided to buy some of their tools to see if they're worth the money. As well as advertising at me every time I turn on the computer, TEMU have been in touch to ask me to publicise their shopping channel, which is never going to happen, but it doesn't stop me from buying some of their tat so I can show you what it's like. So in this video I'm going to show you my top TEMU tools so you can decide whether they're worth the money. So let's start with something very cheap like a laser level. If you've been watching the channel for a time, you know that I like to use a nice laser level. So how about a laser level for less than £4? £3.98 buys you from TEMU your own laser level. It doesn't come with any batteries because the batteries probably cost more than the actual item. So the first thing I need to do is put in some batteries. Okay, so I've got some batteries in it. I'm a little bit confused because first of all on these instructions, I said, well, comments on the box. First of all, it says it takes 3 batteries, but it clearly doesn't. It only takes 2. It also says that the laser is horizontal, but when I turn it on, it's actually a vertical beam. So there's no horizontal element about it at all, unless you put it on its side. It also says the leveling type is automatic. And what you find on proper laser levels is that when you get it within a few degrees of level, there's a pendulum inside that takes over. And as long as you're there or thereabouts, the pendulum is the thing that will balance the laser level. And that's sometimes why you see it just moving slightly before it settles itself out. Now I can tell you, although this says automatic, I can absolutely guarantee that there is no pendulum in here at all. It's essentially fixed to this plastic casing. So I can feel that nothing is moving about. So it's not an automatic laser level, it's just a plastic box with 2 little bubble levels at the top at 90 degrees to each other, and then a laser that's coming out that is, well, I was going to say vertical, but you don't know it's vertical because it's not even on a pendulum, so it's just up and down, but that doesn't mean to say it's actually vertical. I thought I'd just show you another laser level that I bought recently. This is off of Amazon, and it wasn't very much. It's only sort of £25 or something, and it's one of their cheapest. But just to demonstrate the self-balancing, what we call an automatic level, when you turn it on and you move it, can you see the way that moves and settles down on its own? That's because there's a pendulum in there that adjusts the laser, and as long as this is within maybe 5 degrees of vertical, then the rest is done by the pendulum in there. And that's normally why when you turn it off, it doesn't just turn it off, it actually locks the pendulum, so when it's in your car you don't sort of ruin the thing. And you can feel that when you turn it on, it frees the pendulum and then turns it on, and it actually, you can hear it rocking about. And that is what we call an automatic level, which this definitely isn't. Right, let's move on to the next couple, which I quite like. And the first one out of the next 2 is just a propelling pencil, but it's in that shape that is all the rage these days, especially with carpenters that working on YouTube. And I don't have one because I've seen them in the shops and they're like £12, which I think is a bit too much for any type of propelling pencil. So I bought one here off of TEMU, and it's exactly the same shape as those green ones that you would see in the shops, and it propels quite well. In fact, the lead is quite long. I think these are about 120 or 5 inches long, so it seems to work quite nicely. The propelling mechanism definitely holds the lead quite nicely. And what I do like is that this little cap at the back actually unscrews to expose, and I don't know if you can see that, it's actually a mini sharpener, a really little diddly one, that's just about the right size to sharpen the end of this. So you can actually sharpen it. And I must admit, it actually sharpens it really nicely to a nice point. So I can see myself using this, although it doesn't have a sheath like the more expensive one. But I think I will use that. I used to use like Propelling Pencils quite a lot as a sort of junior engineer. So quite impressed with that, and I think that'd be used again. Going along the same sort of lines, I also bought some pens. And these aren't any normal pens, but I've not seen this type before. You might be interested in these. These are, well, they're called long nib markers. And the thing about them is, quite simply, they have a long nib on them, which isn't something I've ever seen before. So if you are trying to mark through something that's fairly thick, like ply, you can actually get all the way through to mark, which I think is a brilliant invention. It might have been around forever, but I've never seen them. This pack here comes in 4 colours, blue, red, green and black. And price-wise, these were £3. I don't know if these will ever take over the Marksman, because what this is really good at is marking really deeper holes, like through a piece of 4x2 or something. This won't be able to mark anything nearly that depth, but probably will come in useful. So I would put these in the category of put them somewhere safe, because you definitely use them at some point in the future. I'd put this pencil in the category of put it in your pocket now, because I think I'll probably be using it here by the end of the day. Right, I've got another one for you, which you'll like. Not a lot, but you'll like. And it's a pair of calipers. And before I go anywhere, I'll tell you how much these were. And these were just over £3. Not bad for a set of calipers, I hear you say. And as woodworkers and DIYs, it's always really handy to get a pretty exact measurement on nuts and bolts or holes or whatever. So you don't have to do too much in the workshop before you really need a pair of calipers. And these are digital. You'd have seen something similar before. These are the ones that you'll see me use nearly all the time on the channel. A set of digital calipers which are accurate enough for really anything you're going to need to do in the workshop. And these look exactly the same. It's got a digital readout and it's got 2 buttons. One is on and off and one which is a reset at the 0 point. But things are not quite as they seem from first glance. You'll see that although these 2 sets of calipers actually look very similar, and I think the digital section of them is, I think, absolutely identical, although the ones that I normally use are to 2 decimal places and these ones are to 1 decimal place. Although they look very similar, the big difference is that my existing ones are made out of aluminium, whereas the TEMU version is purely plastic. Yep, you heard me right. This is completely plastic. Every part of this is plastic, and you don't have to pick it up for very long before you realise it feels a lot more like a child's toy than a specialist measuring piece of equipment. I think the funniest thing is on all of these you have this sort of roller ball that engages and disengages for fine adjustment. On here there's just like, I'll show you here. On here there's just like this moulded section that you can actually see the injection moulding joint in the middle that does absolutely nothing. So basically you open and close it just by doing this. There's no knob on the back for tightening the thing or locking it off at all. You just move it backwards and forwards. The thing that I find most surprising is that after saying all of that and the fact that it's sort of like a toy, it's actually quite accurate. More accurate than I thought. So if I can compare it with my existing calipers here, let's just set this up. So let's just, as I open my existing ones, here I've got 21.19, here I've got 21.2, 39.17, 39.1. Just do a really wide one here, 92.18, and I've got 92.2. So these are amazingly close to each other, and because this is only 1 decimal place, they're probably reading the same thing, which is quite amazing actually. And the other thing I've noticed on this is that if I open and close it a number of times, it still just resets back to 0. So for just measuring screws and thicknesses of bits of ply or whatever, this is absolutely fine. So what do I recommend on this one? Bit of a plastic toy. I wouldn't buy it if you're seriously into anything to do with woodwork, but if you do get it for £3, then keep it on the side. Might come in handy Oh yeah, the other thing is it doesn't actually come with a battery, so you do need to buy a battery, which is probably the same cost as the thing to start with, so you've just doubled the cost just by buying a battery. Right, this next one I think you'll like, because this is really cheap and cheerful and something that I've used quite a lot in a different format that's worked really well. And what it is it's a magnetic drill bit holder that you fit over the shaft of your electric screwdriver, your cordless combi drill, to make it magnetic and make it hold screws in the end. And all you do, and you really need a slightly longer bit here, is you slip it over the end and it sort of like wobbles into place, and then it just hangs around on the shaft. And that means that when you get a screw, the screw is now magnetized because there's a magnet in here. But if you then slip this to the screw, now it holds onto it, which is exactly the same as this drill bit holder that I've been using for some time from DeWalt. And a lot of people ask me about this, and I can't remember where I got it from now. It's some online tool shop, and which is essentially the same. There's a magnet in there, which means when you put a screw on and just push that forward, now suddenly this is well secure, and it means you can just screw it with one hand rather than having the second hand holding the screw. And this does exactly the same. It's essentially the same thing, but you can sort of retrofit it to your bits. And the good thing about this is, if I look at the cost, this is less than 90p. So these ones that you can get in different colours, you could maybe buy sort of 3 or 4 of them and put them on the shafts of your screw bits. And looking at it, it seems to work quite well. I've not actually used it in oh, let's put it into a bit of timber, shall we? See how it works, shall we? Yeah, that's okay. That works exactly the same as this DeWalt one, to be honest with you. The only thing I would say is you do really need a long enough shaft, as they say, to be able to use this properly. If you've got something really short sticking out the end of your combi drill, it's not really going to fit. So something like this, which is like a couple of inches long and probably the right size, I don't know, it just sort of fits on mine, actually does the job quite nicely. So I'm quite impressed with that. And especially being less than £1, I think like the next time I buy anything from TEMU, just going to add a couple of those onto my list just because I think they're going to come in useful in the future. So that one, a success. Out of all the things I bought from TEMU, this next one is definitely my favourite. Have you ever wanted to own a chainsaw but didn't want to pay the price that you see in the shops? Well, for less than £10, yes, £9.27, you can now own your own mini chainsaw. You'll like this. This is I can't believe this. And I'll tell you what it is. It's an attachment that you fit to your drill, in my case a cordless drill, to turn it into a chainsaw. And I've already put this together because I was so eager to see what it looked like. So you have a little handle, and as the drill spins the shaft, it turns a chainsaw blade. Now, before I go any further, I would suggest that anyone attempting to do this should know what they're doing, because this is really dangerous. The instructions that are on this little bit of paper are less than useless. I can put it together but only because I've got my own chainsaw, so I sort of understand the principles of it. But if you don't really know how to put a chainsaw together, these instructions aren't really going to help you. But I'll show you along the way anyway. First of all, we have a chain that comes in this nice little wrapper. There we go. Pretty standard sort of chainsaw blade. And there's no mention in the instructions on which way the chain goes. Obviously there is a right and there's a wrong way. You can tell by the way the teeth should be cut in towards you. But anyway, it's really exactly the same as a standard chainsaw. It's just a lot smaller. Around the cogs. And then, just like the real ones, it's fitted on like that. They even give you this little screwdriver to adjust this screw here. And all the instructions say about the chain is make sure there is proper slack. So I don't know what they really mean by proper slack. The total length of this chainsaw, I would suggest, is about 6 inches, about 150. So you're not going to be chopping down any major trees, I don't think, with this. Let me just adjust the tension on the blade, just going with what I've been taught by steel. So that's got a little bit of slack, no oil in there at all. If I just tighten this up, this should hold everything in place. Now, would you believe, the one thing they do also give you is this piece of plastic here, which sort of looks like a fake guard. And I assume, actually, that should have gone in there before I tighten that up, shouldn't it? Now, the proper guards, obviously on proper chainsaws, have actually got a brake on them. So if the thing flies back in your face, then the guard hits your hand and breaks the chain, or puts a brake on the chain before it's got a chance of hurting you. This guard is once again a bit like a toy. So there's the, I mean, what is that doing? Complete waste of time. Anyway, so if I spin this, yeah, the chain, okay, that might be a bit tight actually. So let's put it on the drill. And I think I'm going to take my life in my own hands. I advise people not to do this at home, actually. This is for entertainment purposes only, unless you really want a 6-inch chainsaw for less than £10. Let's get the drill, shall we? Right. So there you go. That is the chainsaw. About a 6-inch blade, a silly guard that does absolutely nothing. This handle you can actually put on the top or the bottom. I've got it on the side because it just feels like the right thing to do. And I've got my cordless drill ready to... This makes me a little bit nervous, this does, but I think I'm going to just stand slightly away and hold it tight. Let's see if this actually works. Whoosh! Well, that was what you call a fairly rough cut, to say the least. It's absolutely ripped through that timber, but not really in a nice way. So the conclusion is, it is a chainsaw. It's definitely a chainsaw. It is sawing and it has got a chain. Would I recommend it? Nope, I absolutely wouldn't. It doesn't give a clean cut in any shape or form. Just go and buy a proper tool to cut timber of this size. I suppose you could use it up on a branch maybe in the garden. So other than pruning something in the garden, there's no woodwork use for this at all. But if you want a chainsaw for less than £10, then go for it. Just when you cut your finger off, don't blame me. And lastly, let's just finish on another spectacular fail, because I bought this thinking that it's a right angle attachment for a drill, so you can actually drill in small places. You can put the drill in and drill or screw or whatever. And quite wrongly, I assumed that if I spun this end, then this end would turn round and I could put something like a screw bit in it like this, and then be able to sort of screw in tight corners. But you don't have to play with it for very long before you realise that all it is a wrench, and this has no shaft in it at all. This is just a piece of metal, and it's got an attachment at one end for some sort of bit and at the other. So I think this has been designed on purpose to look like a right angle attachment for a drill to get people to buy it, which is, I think, is a little bit naughty. But then this cost 87 pence. So what do you expect for 87 pence? Which just about sums up most of this stuff that I've got from TEMU. Some of it's okay. It's all really, really cheap. And I suppose the thing that we all have to bear in mind is if something is cheap, then you're only going to get what you pay for. I still like the chainsaw attachment the best, although I wouldn't recommend anyone buys this because it's quite dangerous. I hope you've enjoyed this selection of tat from TEMU, and I will see you next time.